Hello and welcome to today's special edition of the 4Ps podcast. As you know, we have the 4Ps book. There will be a new release coming soon. I do want to tell you that here very soon. It's going to be a redo of the original 4Ps with a little bit more to it. And we also have the Stories of franchise. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Stories of. You're like, dude, how many books do you come out with in a week? We come out with a lot. But what I do want to say is this. We have two books that come out for the Stories of franchise. And these two books come out once a year. So last year, 2024, even though it was back to back because we just came out with the concept, we had them running like literally they were about maybe about 3 weeks apart. But we had Stories of Children Lost and we have Stories of Veterans. Now, again, those are two entirely different Stories of types franchise. But we the Stories of Children Lost, obviously, you know my story. Don't have to bring it up again. But it is a story where in the Stories of Children Lost, we have different authors that are sharing their stories of losing their child. Now, in the Stories of Veterans is a great. It's stories of veterans from from military to civilian life. Now, the United States military, I don't care which branch it is, because these are all U.S. soldiers. The United States military, they do a hell of a job making us civilians into soldiers, sailors, Marine, airmen, and whatever they call Space Force people now. I'm going to call them like spacemen. Maybe. All right. They do a great job doing that. What the problem is bringing us back into the civilian sector. Depression runs in, a whole bunch of stuff goes in. And so that's what that book's about. The Stories of Veterans from military to civilian life. Yes, that's exactly what it's about. It's about stories. Again, I have great veterans who have come together and put together their story. All of these books are here. They're not here for you to sit there and say, oh my gosh, can't believe you went through that. You are going to say that, but it is there to help you. If you are a veteran, great book for you to read because you can read it if you're a veteran. If you lost a child, I'm sorry, that is an unimaginable loss. It is a horrible loss. It's something that you don't want to go through. That is a great book. And it's not just one size fits all. I try to go and find people to share their stories. So at least there will be one story in the book that you can associate with, that you can relate to, and that can help you in your journey. Today, we have some of the authors from our book called Stories of Friends and Family Lost. And Stories of Friend and Family Lost, it's not just about children. There are some children in the book. But it's about people who've lost their spouse, people who've lost their parents. I wrote briefly about losing my father in the book. It is a great book to help you through that transition as well. Again, it is a transitional time. And all of these books are here to help. They're here to help you through the transition. In addition to that, some of our money from these books, they go to nonprofits to help people in, there are huge organizations that are helping people through the grief process, through the veterans transition process, and this, that, and the other. They need help. And some of these books are designed to help those individuals, not only through reading, but through financial means as well. So that's what this is all about, is to help people. So like I said, there's two books that come out a year. The first installation of 2025 is, I almost want to call it volume 2 of Stories of Children Lost, but it is not. It's a lot more inclusive as far as the different types of loss that people go through. And so we have some of the authors that were in there a part of today's podcast, and they're going to be discussing their role in the book and what drove them to write the book. We'll be right back right after this.
Grief is a language we all understand, but healing begins with shared stories. Stories of Friends and Family Lost brings together powerful first-hand accounts from those who've experienced unimaginable loss and found strength on the other side. Whether you've walked that path or love someone who has, This book is a tribute to love, resilience, and remembrance. Available now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. Stories of friends and family lost, because no one should grieve alone.
Welcome back to the Four Ps podcast. And this is part of my Stories of series. And the Stories of, obviously, we've had the first one that came out was Stories of Children Lost. And then back in December, we had Stories of Veterans in Transition. The next book in our Stories of series is called Stories of Friends and Family Lost. And this book is, I don't, some people say it's a continuation of Children Lost. It is not. Because there is a different type of loss that we have in here. It's more encompassing, but it's also something that deals with grief on several different levels. And today I have some of the authors that are going to be a part of this book, and I'm going to tell you it is touching. Some of the stories obviously it is in editing right now, and it will be out in May of 2025. But I wanted to bring some of the authors on to talk about the book and talk about, not really necessarily talk about the book, but talk about why they wanted to participate. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to give each of the authors that are here today a little time to introduce themselves and ask them what motivated them to get involved in this project. And we'll start. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say Wendy will start. Please, Wendy, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Blackstern, and I am the founder of the Center for Somatic Grieving. And I've been in the business of supporting others through grief for the last 17 years since I lost my son. And, like I think many of us might say, it's not a path that many of us choose, but sometimes a path that chooses us. And after having had a background in working as a yoga therapist and doing somatic therapy with people, when I went through my own loss, I was really struck by how much support I needed and what I needed. And it set me on my course. And pretty much since I lost my son, his name's Noah, lost him 17 years ago. And since then, it has been in my heart to share my story and to tell Noah's story. And in the beginning, when that need to tell his story was there, it was so much for my own healing. I needed him to be remembered. I needed the world to know about my beautiful boy and to give meaning to his life. And it led me to starting a nonprofit organization, the Grief Support Network, that I ran for many years. And so I was telling my story, in a way to invite people to become a part of this community that I had created. And it had a different flavor back then. I was so deep in my grief. It was so raw that it was just needing to kind of work through that. And many, many years later now, I feel like I'm in such a different place, and sharing my story has such a different quality and feeling in me. This opportunity to share in this book felt like a really important stepping stone, an opportunity to not just share, what came out of losing Noah, which is the story I've been telling for many years, is like the beauty, the light, the love, the personal growth, the profound transformation that grief cracks us open to. I've been telling that story, but this is different because this is the first opportunity I've had, and I thank you, Trunnis, for this, to actually share like Noah's story, like what happened, like the experience of losing him. And for many years, I've protected myself and my husband, I think, from sharing some of these details because it was traumatic. And at this more integrated place in my own development, it feels really important to not only say all the beauty that came out of it and who I am because of it, but to actually share what happened. Because the story itself, as I've been writing it and reading it, and I've been kind of steeped in it over these last month with this invitation, I'm going through another layer of my own healing and self-understanding. And I'm recognizing that we need to sometimes see and hear each other's like raw experience, including the pain, including the really hard moments, to really touch and to feel connected to the story. And then as I share what came out of it, it's maybe more relevant, more powerful, and people can see themselves in me. I know my experience of supporting people in the work I do a lot of group work. So I sit in circle, that I see as people are talking about their grief, I see myself in each person. And in so many ways, I fall in love with each person I work with because of their vulnerability, because they're speaking so bravely from the heart of what they've been through. And so this is my moment, I guess, to do the same and
Thank
to
you
share the depths of my own experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And one thing you did say, and we're going to come back to this in a little bit. You said the beauty, and this is the first time I've ever actually matched beauty in any of this. And for you to say that, I was sitting there thinking for a little while, like how could it be? And we'll discuss it a little deeper in a little bit. But yeah, thank you for actually bringing that adjective up in this I think it's an adjective. I don't know. I haven't been to third grade English in a long time, but yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Kim.
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Kim Rich. I live in the Chicago suburbs. I am the founder of Tomorrow Morning, and through that organization, I offer grief and end of life support. I received my doctoral degree in grief and bereavement, and am also a certified death doula. So I use that education to help me in my work. I wrote for this book actually about the loss of my mother, and the loss of my mother is what led me into this work. My mother died in 2021, and similar to some of the things that Wendy said, I had lost some people in my life, but I think the loss of my mom was probably my first real grief experience, and I was so surprised by how wildly unprepared I was for that. Especially, and this is where Wendy, you and I differ, losing my mom was kind of the natural order of the world, right? So this was something that was always destined to happen. It certainly happened at a much younger age than the average, but it was still destined to happen. And I don't think had my mom lived to be 70 or 80 that I would have been any more prepared. I just started to notice that, especially in our culture, but I even think worldwide, we have such an avoidance to learning about something and understand something that I'm going to keep using that word destined, but that we're just destined to experience, that the only way to avoid grief is to be the one to die first. And that's not what most of us are hoping for, right? So this is part of the human experience. And I had been a teacher and a school principal for 24 years, and we don't talk about this in schools. We don't prepare children for it. We openly prepare 5-year-olds for active shooter situations, but we don't talk at all about grief and how to manage grief and what tools and resources are available for that grief. And so when I lost my mom and was confused and overwhelmed and didn't know where to turn and how to even figure out if what I was experiencing was normal or how to write an obituary, it felt ridiculous that Google was my only resource for that. And it's a resource that is really very lacking, to be honest. And so, I decided that the world needs people who are going or are willing to be teachers in this area, right? It's such an area of discomfort for so many. I know there are 9 of us here right now, and I think 12 to 14 that contributed in this book. And at first glance, that feels like a lot, but it's just not, for the number of people out there who are experiencing end of life and grief and loss, there's so few resources. And so I decided that I really wanted to work to add to that I wanted to be a resource people could turn to. And I want information about grief and everything that follows a loss to be readily available to people who need it. I don't want people to have to search to find it. I want people to be able to find it as easily as they can find information about how to change a light bulb or unclog their toilet, right? Because this is something that happens. So, in addition to the work that I do, and I am doing a lot of work in preparing people for end of life if they have a terminal illness. And then I do a book club for people who are grieving. I have a writing group for people who are grieving. And I meet with small groups also of grievers. But I'm also doing a lot of writing and a lot of public speaking. And that writing and that public speaking is to try to get this message out there and to try to have it in as many places as possible, so that when someone is a new griever, when someone is new to end of life, they are easily able to find as much information as possible. So participating in this book, telling the story of the loss of my mom. I also talk a little bit about that piece, how I transitioned into a learner because I wanted to better understand it. Is just another way and another vehicle for me to try to help the next griever who is out there. And I know I'm in wonderful company. Some of you I know, those who I don't, I'm just terribly excited to read your pieces also and to be able to use this book as a resource for my clients. So thank you for including me.
And thank you for being a part of it. Absolutely. And you're right. You say a lot of things. We all know that it's going to happen. My mother she's in her late 70s now, and she just bought a dog. And one of the things that when she bought the dog, it's a puppy. And one thing she said during her process in buying the dog, she was thinking about the dog's longevity, because she wanted to, she didn't want to have that to be an issue in her passing. So that was a consideration. And when she said that, even though I, wrote about my father in the book, it's just like, wow, it's, this might be your last dog. And it was the weirdest feeling having that conversation. And it's great that you brought that up, because again, sometimes even though we know it's going to happen, we don't accept that it's going to happen. And I think that actually complicates the grieving process even more than what it should. Angie, how are you? Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Again, thank you for having me in the book, and I'm anxious to read everyone else's stories as well. But I am Angie, and I am from Nebraska. And, my journey began in 2006. And I lost my son, my 1-year-old son, Garrett, in 2006, unexpectedly to a heart defect that we did not know he had. And so, we journeyed through that, and we got a year later into our grief with Garrett. And my husband, Jack, at the time, he was diagnosed with cancer. And so Jack was diagnosed with ocular melanoma, and he was diagnosed stage 4 terminal, as it had spread to his brain, his liver, and his spleen. So our journey through grief of our son took a big turn into trying to fight for my husband's survival in life. And I didn't know how I would be able to do life without him. Our daughter at the time, Gracie, she was 4 when our son died. And so Jack battled his cancer for about 16 months. He lost his cancer battle on February 8th, 2009. And he, that was 2 short years after our son had died. And then along the way, life doesn't just stop at 1 or 2 or 3 or more. But my brother, Seth, who had been battling a brain tumor, he lost his battle exactly 2 months after my husband died. He was a very healthy young man, and he had gotten through all his surgeries and everything very well. He'd done very well. And then a month after my husband died, I don't know if it was the stress or what it was, but he started having issues again. And this time he just didn't bounce back. And It was just at that turning point, I was just like honestly lost. I didn't know how to move forward. I had a daughter who was then just turned 6. And to navigate all the complex griefs that we had was something that a lot of people couldn't understand. And you think back 2006, that was 19, it'll be 19 years that my son's been gone in June. And then, 2009, there just was not the community, there was not the support, there was not anything on the internet. I mean, barely internet was out there. We had Facebook, but we didn't use it. It was not utilized. And so that's when I decided that I had to make a choice, and I had to choose if I was going to survive and thrive and lead my daughter into a beautiful life, or was I going to just give up, become a crappy mom, and not live. And I chose to honor my people. I chose to live for their memories, create a beautiful life that they would have wanted us to live, and that they just would be begging us to thrive in. So several years later, I decided to, well, several years, many years, 2022 to be exact, I decided to create a grief greeting card company called Butterflies and Halos. And that was just my outlet of supporting my people, right? And how can we navigate grief, and how can we change the narrative that's out there? Their grief and death has such a big stigma on how we approach people. And I wanted friends to walk alongside their other friends that were grieving. And so I just created snarky, punny little cards that were the heart of everyone's mailbox that people wanted to receive. And so through that, I also wrote my first memoir, Chapters of a Resilient Heart, that was released in June of last year, June of 2024. And so it's been coming up on 1 year. And that is the stories of my people. That is the stories of my son. And I go deep. I talk about his, like you talked about, Wendy, I go deep into his story. I go deep into my husband's story. And I use my husband's words through, his cancer journey as he journaled about all that. But through this, when I talked to Trunnis about, my many losses, he asked me to write about my husband, my late husband, because I truly believe, and as we are talking, I think Trunnis agrees with me that, the stress of losing our son, Jack was our anchor. And he was the one holding us up. He was not grieving properly. He was not grieving at all. I don't think. And I just think that grief and the death and everything manifested inside of his body because he wasn't releasing it. And I think that probably that is why his cancer cells ignited in his body. And, we all have cancer cells in our body, whether they lay dormant or not. It's how we deal with stress and anxiety and all that. And so I write in the stories I write about my late husband, Jack, his journey through cancer, and just the incredible human that he was, and the amazing strength he portrayed to everybody going through 16 months of cancer. It was not easy, all while grieving his son and trying to create a beautiful life for my daughter and I. So,
Angie, thank you for sharing that story, because during the time of this book, during the production time of this book, one of our authors, who's actually here today, it's Parul. She actually lost someone during this ordeal. And as a result, the book itself is actually going to be dedicated to the person who she lost. And it's a major loss. And she was writing about another loss. And it has something directly to do with a father's love for their child. Um, please, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, and then you can go ahead and go forward.
Hi. I'm Parul. I'm based out of Long Island, New York, and I've interacted with most of you. I am a dentist, and I was happy in my dentistry world with my four walls and practicing on patients. My world turned upside down after losing my youngest and only sibling. And, you do anticipate the loss of a parent, somebody older, perhaps an older sibling. And I lost Manu in 2021 in the midst of COVID, and I couldn't be there because the US Canada borders are shut down. And you need a compassion release letter from the government. It takes a while, 3 days of PCR testing. And this time, I visited him in December of 2020 without being vaccinated. And I share that, having to take that journey in the book. But I was vaccinated. There was a whole issue with that, like, oh, COVID, New York's the epicenter. And it was crazy times with no handbook inside. And so when I lost him, I didn't know what to do with myself. And the things that I heard afterwards, how long is it going to take for you to be over this? Do you want to come out here? Do you want to do this? I'm like, no. I knew that if I don't take care of myself, nobody else will. And so I had started becoming more vocal on my needs. And I think as society, as an Indian woman, we're always like, oh, we need to take care of parents and in-laws and kids. And somewhere in that, we lose ourselves. And losing Manu was even harder because I have lived in 5 different countries, so I never had that village protecting me. Nobody knew Manu, like telling me little stories about him. Hey, his friends, or around the corner, oh, this is where we went for ice cream. I didn't have those little tidbits. He wasn't a regular occurrence for my children, like, oh yeah, we're going to movie night with uncle. None of that existed. We just visited during the holidays. So that core essence of having a family protect you and shield you from a grief, I didn't have that. My parents lived in a different country. So finding other people on the internet, doing podcasts. And for me, one of the things I felt was failed as a sister, because it was my job to protect him. We're almost 8 years apart. So I remember changing his diapers. And so I failed to protect him as a sister. I failed as a daughter, helping my parents, who were aging, who have seen and suffered a loss of a parent dying of cancer, my grandmother. And also just with the COVID, taking to the doctors, picking up medication, and all of that. I felt failed. I failed as a dentist. That Manu died of oral cancer, and he was a dentist like myself. That, hey, you need to get this checked out. Let's get you a biopsy. Because of distance played a factor. So the one thing I could do for him, he had asked me to publish his book, his writings that he actually started. He called it a survival guide, and he was doing it in his last few days, and it was his wish to be published. So when he died, I published the book, Life Interrupted, Dr. Doula's Survival Guide. And I finished it for him in the sense I wrote the epilogue. I didn't change any of his writings and put it in the same order that he wrote them in. And I published it within months of his passing. I was like, at least let me share you with the world that you wanted. The one thing that I couldn't do anything else. I can do this. And so I've been vocal in sharing this journey because there is, and I'm sure most of you know this, there's a maternity leave, but there is no bereavement leave. And after coming back, it was like, oh, go see patients. I shut the office for 3 weeks. So one of the things that I do is openly talk about grief and educating healthcare professionals on grief, healing the healers, because it's a topic that's not often discussed. Dentistry is an isolating profession. We deal with small spaces, with patients with high anxiety, and top it off with having to deal with grief. And yes, I lost my dad, went through, and I openly talk about this and I share this in the book, being an only son, having lost both his parents, his dad early in life when he was 2, and then the only other parent he ever knew die of cancer, and then lose his son. He went in, and then he lost his in-laws within that time frame. So from 2021 to 2024, My mother lost her parents, her son, and then her husband. But my dad just couldn't take it, and he came back from a trip. I talked to him on Thanksgiving, and the next day he was in a hospital with cardiac arrest, unable to revive. He had a clean bill of health, 2 surgeries. He was completely fine, no heart conditions. The doctors were like, his heart just stopped. It's just a broken heart syndrome. And I got to say goodbye to my brother, but not to my dad. I always anticipated him being around. I think losing a parent, yes, it is, and that's the law of nature. You're never prepared for it, no matter what you know. And, parents are just special people. They protect you, they shield you from harshness of life. And I feel even more, it's like my ozone layer is exposed and I keep getting burnt out in the sun. That's how I feel. And so I share that journey. It happened so quickly. I didn't even know what to process. I flew knowing that I was planning another funeral, and I made sure that my dad would be cremated in the same crematorium, same room as my brother. I knew the funeral director, and as I sat for my dad, I was so mad at my brother. I'm like, you made me do this alone. Who am I going to share these little nuances with? And when I lose my mom, again, maybe in 10 years, 15 years, I hope she'll be around a little bit longer. I'm going to have to do this again all by myself. And nobody's going to tell you my stories at my funeral of how I grew up. So these books, Trunnis, thank you. It's a testament of my family. And this is why I write, like I have something tangible. Like my brother's book is like, hey, we did this together. It's something, I don't have his kids. I don't have anything else. I have no other memories. But the book that we did this project together, this is our timestamp in life, and it is eternal. So my family will die after my mom, and it's like, oh my God, I have to give birth to my children to have biological family. So, but anyhow, but that's my story. And, same thing. I cremated him, and on a Sunday, Tuesday, I was seeing patients. And it's just, so I go through these elements of sitting in my car. When I used to talk to my dad after work, he would be like, oh, how's the business doing? How's this? How's that? Your mom's doing this. I don't have any of it. And so I miss him. And so now a lot of times in my car, I just cry. I'm like, I miss you. So that's my story.
Thank you for sharing that story. It's funny you bring up. I used to do a call. My mom and dad divorced when I was like 12. Okay, but I used to call my mother in the morning. Every morning when I was on my way to work, my mother was like the cheerleader. Oh, everything is going to be great. Da, 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 da. And then on my way home at night, I would call my dad and get that quick reality check. You know what I mean? Yeah, life does suck, doesn't it? You just got your butt kicked today, didn't you? Like, yes, I did. Thank you very much. And it was great that I had that call. It was my father died on a Monday, and I remember leaving work Tuesday because I went to work because that's what you do. That's what I did. And I remember going to work, and I remember calling my mom that morning, and I remember getting into my car and just by instinct alone, pressing the button on my car, on the phone to call my dad. And the phone rang, and my dad's widow answered the phone, and I really had to like, whoa, wait a minute, and I had to correct. I was just calling to make sure we're going to be there, and I had to like literally like come up with something different because I didn't want. There's two things. Number one, I didn't want that intimate moment to ever be broken, which me and my dad had, and I didn't want to tell him that that's what I was calling for. Number two, I didn't know what she was going through at the time, so it was kind of that uncomfortable. I called for another reason, and it's great that you called your father as well all the time, and that's a it's funny that my dad died 10 years ago, and I've had I don't know how many cell phones. You upgrade all the time, but yet my father's phone number, his cell phone, is still in my contact. Still, I won't let it go. It's still, I mean, if I dial the number, somebody's going to answer because by this time, I'm sure someone else has the number. But yeah, still in my contact. Krishma, Thank you for being on the program. If you don't mind sharing your story.
Well, thank you, Trunnis, for having me here. And I'm so emotional after hearing everybody's stories of loss. It's a lot. It's a lot to process. It's a lot of grief and sadness. But what I've also noticed is this thread of inspiration through all of you. You know, you've all taken your grief and your loss and tried to turn it into something positive, not only for your own self-healing in your own life, but to even help others through the grieving process. So, I mean, you should all feel so good about yourselves because you're doing so wonderful, wonderful things. And I was thinking about what Parul was saying about how she was so angry with her brother when her father passed that, you know, you left me alone through this, you know, to face this all alone. And I think that it kind of reminded me of, so let me introduce myself. My name is Krishma, and I lost my son in May. Will be 21 years, and I lost him December 3rd, 2004. And I was about 25 years old at that time. And he was about 7-8 months old. And again, he was not sick, so it was unexpected. And also, the way we've been talking about it again throughout this conversation was it wasn't really his time to go, right? Because I'm his mother, and we expect our children to outlive us. And at least that's our hope, right? That they will. So of course I wasn't expecting it. And when he passed away, I was really blown away because, like my grandmother was still alive, you know, my parents, my grandmother, everyone was still there, and my child was gone. And, so going back to what Parul was saying about feeling alone. So even though I had my husband and my parents and everybody was there, I felt that his death was a very isolating experience. I felt very alone. It didn't matter who else was around me. I just felt that no one was feeling what I was feeling. It seemed that the burden of grief was heaviest on me, even more so than my husband. And you know, looking back, I realized, yes, you know, everyone handles grief differently, but for him, he had to go back to work because he couldn't deal with processing his feelings. So he sort of had to put them away for another time when he could deal with it. And, you know, move on was the words that I kept hearing. So, you know, when you said, Parul, the things that people said, like, how long is this going to take you? You know, I can relate to that because those were the things I was hearing, you know, even months afterwards, like, well, you know, you really should move on, and you really should get over this, and you really should, you know, have another baby. And, you know, and it was horrible. I actually began to hate those words, moving on. I never wanted to move on. I never wanted to betray the memory of my son, because that would mean to forget him. And I never wanted him to be forgotten. And so I was having a very hard time, because then I moved back with my husband to England, where we were living at the time, and my family's all in New York, based in New York. And so I was there with my in-laws and my husband, and not really my own friends and not my own parents. And so even more isolated. And then I was pregnant again, because I was forced under that pressure of have another baby. That's the way to heal. But honestly, if anyone here knows, as you know from having children that you've lost, many of you on this panel, that one child doesn't replace another child. It's actually not comforting to say that to anyone who has lost their child. And but there I was, pregnant, still depressed, still very anxious, and not being able to move on, quote unquote. And so what I found, the only thing that was a way of sort of a release for me was to start writing. I had always been a writer since I was a kid. I mean, nothing professional or anything, but I just loved to write. So I started to write a story about a family who had experienced loss. In a way, I started to displace all my feelings onto the characters of the story. And soon and over the years, I had more children. I went back for a master's in teaching. I went back. I started teaching high school history full time. And then, but in between, I would pick up the book and start writing again. And then, so over the years, and from my 20s into my 30s, and finally, my husband said, "What is it that you're writing?" And when he read it, I think he realized that it was really my book dedicated to our son Kabir and to his loss and to his memory. And although the characters were fictional, he understood that all the emotions were real. And he encouraged me to finish the book. And actually, I think that's where all my true healing took place, where it was in the release of the feelings that were and the emotions that were repressed from the loss. And I finished the book, and it became a novel. It was published 2 years ago. It's called From Ash to Ashes. And although it's not a memoir or an exact story of Kabir, it is dedicated to his memory and to his loss. And it is a story of loss where when you read it, anyone who has experienced loss can resonate with it. They can also pick up from the power within the story, where at the end of the story, overcome is not the correct word. The correct word would probably be learn to live and thrive, like Angie said in the beginning, right? Am I going to die from this, or am I going to survive and thrive and give, your other daughter, and by then I had 2 other children, I'm going to give them a life and my own self a life that we all deserve to flourish. And so that's how the book also ends. So it's a story of hope in a way. In a dark tunnel, there's the light. And so I'm so grateful that Trunnis, that you were able to make me a part of this book as well, to contribute and to give hope and some relief to the readers who read my story and the story of Kabir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next person I want to introduce is Brittany Young. Now, before I let her talk, I want to say something about Brittany. Her mother was in the first book, Children's Laws, and she lost her son, and Brittany lost her brother. Now, I will say this: what I know, I lost my daughter, and obviously I have other children. One thing I when I read your story, and one thing that I have to say that I've learned, and I know that you're going to share your start is the perspective from a sibling. When I read your story, Brittany, I really read. I actually stopped reading, and I called every single one of my children and said, I was there for you, but there were certain things that I really should have asked you. And I appreciate that. That's one thing you did give to me. And I want to say that publicly, that's what that was what I gathered. And I appreciate that very much. Now, Brittany, there you go.
Aw, thank you for the feedback, Trunnis. I'm, glad that you got something out of it, even if it's just like one person reading it. So thank you. I'm Brittany. Like Trunnis said, I lost my little brother 3 years ago in a motorcycle accident. So he was only 22 years old. And he wasn't just my little brother. He was my best friend. I grew up homeschooled. So a lot of the time, my only friends were my siblings. And we spent every moment together. I was the last person to say goodbye to him because that weekend he'd been visiting me in San Francisco. And so I have a video of waving to him goodbye as he leaves on his motorcycle. And that's, the last interaction we ever had. And losing him turned my life upside down. I was 25, like Krishma, right? And when you're that age, you look around to all your friends and no one can relate to what you're going through, and it feels very isolating. And so I turned to the internet to find other people experiencing what I was experiencing. And yeah, when you're going through it, you feel alone, although logically, there's tons of other people grieving. I mean, the day my brother was killed, according to California Highway Patrol, he was only one of 3 people killed in motorcycle accidents that day. So it's happening all the time, but you just don't meet anyone that's also experiencing it. And that's, the power of the internet. So my mom and I bonded over creating these care packages for other grievers, and we called it Grief Box because it is a physical box that you send to other people who are grieving. And we realized that we needed a more permanent solution to bring grievers together. So we built an online app. It's free for people to chat with each other and find resources. And that's kind of what we've been pouring our grief into. But Trunnis, when I first lost my brother, I read a lot of books about grief, and the ones that really stuck with me were anthologies, because you can find, like Wendy said, you can find pieces of yourself in other people's stories. And so that's what motivated me to, work on this project with you. And I think it's really the most powerful, grief literature I read, was being able to see other people's stories and see myself in them. So yeah, thank you for pulling that all together.
Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for everything that you've done, even beyond this, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And then we are going to stay in. Well, actually, we're not staying in California anymore. Have you already done your trek across the continent, or no?
So some stuff has moved to DC, but I am about to head off on my road trip. I'm driving my car and my dog to DC this next week. So we're about
Very good.
Yeah.
I will say, driving a car and dog to DC, make sure in April that you're still driving. It's still April. Make sure you do it. Take the southern route. Do not try to go through anything Colorado or anything like that, because bad things can happen. And it's called snow, and that is a really bad thing that can happen. So please don't do that. I was in the Navy years ago, and I remember this was in July, driving the Vail Pass in Colorado, and I had shorts and I had sandals, and I got out of the hotel because I spent the night in that area. I got out of the hotel and I had to walk through 3 inches of snow. And then when I got down the mountain, it was like 80 degrees again. So just take the southern route, enjoy. It's like what they say, get your kicks on Route 66. That's what you
Okay. I was planning on going through Colorado, so I'll have to remap out my road trip.
Watch the weather. Laing, now since you just heard a story about get your kicks on Route 66, I wonder how many people are humming that right now, not only in this, but probably out in the podcast world. Laing, welcome to the program, and thank you for being a part of this book as well. Please go ahead and share your story.
Great. Well, thank you. My name is Laing Rikkers, and it is really fascinating hearing everybody's story and sort of being a part of this larger group, which was certainly part of the inspiration for me in terms of participating in this project. So thank you for including me. My story was I lost my younger sister, who was 46, very unexpectedly back in 2019 in December. And the sort of irony of that particular situation was that she died in atrial fibrillation, most likely due to untreated obstructive sleep apnea. And the irony was that I professionally worked in the field. I had co-founded a business that makes medical devices that treat sleep apnea, and had been trying to get her tested and didn't realize that it was in sort of as dire a situation as it was. And so not only was there this very unexpected loss and this guilt of not having done enough, and then based on the timing, it was right before lockdown of COVID. So, like many of you all have mentioned, the isolation of sort of the experience was unexpected, and I didn't know anybody else who had been through it. And then the physical isolation and the sort of existential terror that we all had of the pandemic. I started writing. I had not been a writer before. I read Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way and started doing morning pages, and found that to be really, really helpful. And in the end, wrote a whole bunch of poetry that was sort of emotional, where it defined emotions through metaphors and in nature, and put it together as a book. It is now a gift book for people who are grieving, called Mourning Leaves: Reflections on Loss, Grief, and Connection. It's filled with art and poems and some of the things that I did to help myself in that time. And it was this really unexpected gift to have this book. It did much better than I think anyone kind of expected, and has sort of led to its own life, and has really drawn me into this space of grief and wanting to help other people. And so, as Krishma said, it really has been this opportunity to shift things. So I've now left my corporate life and have started a business doing executive coaching for people who are in some sort of crisis or grief, because I experienced that firsthand as the leader of an organization. It's an isolating enough experience on its own, but when you're handling it with grief as well, there are a number of things that I think can be helpful to people, so that they have someone to talk to, someone to help them understand what their resources are. And so I'm really focusing in on that space. I've done a lot of executive coaching over the years, but I think that this is a particular niche where there's a real opportunity and a real need to help people who are going through a lot of different things. So appreciate the opportunity to share my story in this book. And I love the part of being a community that this book and, reaching out more broadly allows, because I do think that it's very helpful in the healing process.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of the book. I really appreciate it. I really do. Last but certainly not least is Liz. And Liz, the only reason why this is actually our platform's fault that you were the last one. All right. And the way I read. So Liz, you are last. And please tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Liz, and I became into this grief space to start, like several of you, lost my firstborn child in the beginning. And so obviously I didn't write about her. I wrote about my parents. But part of her story and her grief is weaved into the story of my parents. Olivia was born in 2008. And again, like she said, she didn't survive. She was my firstborn. About 10 years later is when my dad died. My dad, Ed and Colleen Fox, are my parents. And in the book, I introduced it as like a love story, because their story truly was a love story. So my dad died from esophagus cancer in 2018. And then 2 years later, my mom passed away from Alzheimer's. And their death crushed me. It's very similar to what others have said, is that like that, I think it was Parul that said that like that ozone layer, now is just like lifted and gone, and now you're like being sunburned the whole time. That's pretty much how it feels, because you lose both of them and your safety nets are gone, and there's not really a word for a child who's lost both parents. In a sense, you kind of become an orphan, but you're not really an orphan because you had parents. Right. So it's just really, like there's bereaved moms and there's, so you're just like a bereaved child. It's just very weird. It's a very complex situation. And so I chose to step into the grief space because I have learned that, kind of like here we are, those shared stories that we have connect us. And by having that connection, like we can all see there's a thread that weaves us together. And like Wendy had mentioned, that like there's pieces of everyone in the story that we can connect with. And that's why I've created the Healing Hearts podcast. And it's just a safe place for you to come and share your story, because everyone has a story and every story matters. And I think that's why I wanted to be part of this project, is because of those shared stories. You know, if my story of losing my parents can help one person, then I'm connected and help and glad. So I would go more details into my parents' story, but I think I want to make sure you guys read the book. I'm anxious and excited and eager to read more of these stories that I have spent the last 45 minutes listening to. Like I said, many of you have said I've met some of you. I know some of you, and some of you I don't. And I look forward to learning more about you. So,
it's funny that you said we were going to learn more about each other. We are going to be hanging out a lot here in the next couple of weeks for sure. The other thing about this book, first of all, let me say this about the book. This is just a snippet of the brave people that shared their story. It is very hard to write about loss. It is extremely hard. It's funny. It's easy to talk about it sometimes because maybe your mind is blocking parts out that you don't have to worry about. You can skip over. But when you are writing, something happens in your mind where you're opened up to all new experiences, and you're reliving some experiences that you forgot you lived in the first place. And so writing.
Can I add to that super quick?
Yes, May, go ahead.
Literally talked about that in therapy after writing this for you. I've been doing a great deal of writing, but I'm writing about things like grief in general. I'm writing about things like preparing for your own end of life. I had never written anything about losing my mom. I had never written it down. And I've been in therapy for 3 years. I love it. I promote it to everyone, especially if you have good insurance and it's already covered. I think it's a huge, huge perk that everyone should take advantage of. But I started writing this story for you and really struggled even to meet the deadline, because every time I would sit to write about losing my mom, it was really difficult. Tears would come, right? I would get a stomach ache because I had not written about it. And I went back into therapy and I said, I thought we were good here. And I don't think we are. Like, there is something in there. And I thought I was good because I'm doing all of this work and I'm okay with all of the work. And all of the work is connected to that loss, but it's not directly dealing with it. So everything you just said was so very true for me, and I think probably for others, but absolutely it is difficult. So congratulations to everyone for their bravery in doing this.
Yes, it is. And I would say congratulations to everybody who's writing this, but I will say that this book is being written for you. We don't want you to go through some of the stages that we probably could have avoided if we talked to somebody. We don't want that to happen. There is no such thing as moving on from a loss. It is going forward, but it's not moving on. There's a totally different thing about that. And everybody who is in this book is talking and helping you move forward in your journey. Again, the book is titled Stories of Friends and Family Lost. It will be out in May. You will be seeing each and every single one of these authors and then some here in the next couple weeks. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. Again, I want you to look at everybody in the podcast notes. I'm going to have links to each and every one. Obviously, there are other projects. There are other books. I want you to get those books. I want you to read those books. They are definitely there to help go into even greater detail and the journeys that all of these authors are taking in their quest to move forward. We'll be right back right after this.
Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. At DNP, we bring your dream, purpose, and passion to life in print. Whether your manuscript is ready to go or just an idea waiting to unfold, we're here to guide you. With expert editing, stunning graphics, and the knowledge to make your book a reality, we'll help you share it with the world. From book festivals to signings, this is your moment. Let's turn your dream, purpose, and passion into print. Connect with us today and make your dream a reality.
Welcome back to the final segment of the 4Ps podcast. Again, this book is powerful. The writers in this book, they are powerful as well. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it at Barnes and Noble. There will be some book events throughout the country. I know that I will be in Buffalo. I cannot wait to go home. There's a couple places I got to stop. I'm actually bringing my grandson with me. This is going to be a grandson, grandfather trip, and I am looking forward to that. He's looking forward to it as well. I did pull up the weather for that time, and come on, please, come on, just give me some better weather. But anyway, this is a powerful book. There will be a book event. It will be at 1515 Kensington Avenue in Buffalo, New York. We are having a book signing. We're also going to have some of the people that we partner with. There will be, I do know that Western New York Heroes will be there. They will have someone there speaking. Tom Bender, who is from the Niagara Falls area and also is an author in the book. He was not in this podcast episode, but he was in one prior. He will be there speaking. And also, we're going to have Vondlin Laing, who is a great counselor. She is going to be there as well. This is how the book works, okay? The book works where, yes, I want you to read it, I want you to buy it, but I also want you to know that when you do buy it, you are helping organizations throughout the country, and in many cases throughout the world. You are helping them help people who are going through grief, who are going through veterans issues, depression and job loss and homelessness and things like that. And also in the future, you will be helping veterans, or you will be helping people go through things like addiction and things like that. Like I said, these books, the Stories of franchise, yes, I have the 4Ps. I want you to buy that too. But I want, when you buy these Stories of franchise books, you are buying it for people. You are helping people out for sure. But you are also through the reading, you're helping people. And you're also financially helping organizations help people who need the help that they need in their communities. We will be back next week. We do have one more podcast that is dealing with the book Stories of Friends and Family Loss. I could say it. I wrote it, I guess. But anyway, that will be Sarah O'Brien. She's going to share her story. Very powerful. It is. And we'll be back next week with her story. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.